The title of the message this morning, we're continuing through our series, Walking with Yeshua through the Gospel of Luke, and we're in a mini-series within the series that I've entitled the Shabbat Chronicles. And the title this morning really is the Shabbat Source of Supply. The Shabbat Source of Supply. As we entered the 6th chapter of Luke, we encountered these back-to-back Shabbat episodes in which Yeshua seems to be accused. He's accused of violating the Shabbat. Luke 6, 1 and 2, it says, "Now during Shabbat, Yeshua was passing through grain fields, and his disciples were picking and eating heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. But some of the Pharisees said, 'Why are you doing what is not permitted on Shabbat?'" And then the second episode follows immediately. It says, on another Shabbat, Yeshua, there's a man there that has a paralyzed hand. And it says that the religious people are watching closely, like watching him out of the corner of their eye. They're not hoping with expectation to see what God might do, that there would be a miraculous work here, a healing of this man. They're not looking for displays of God's power, but they're watching and waiting for Yeshua to slip up and heal on Shabbat, which in their thinking is a violation of Shabbat. In their understanding, healing is a violation of Shabbat. Yeshua's like, are you kidding me? And he cuts past the technicalities. It hits right to the heart of the matter. And he says, Yeshua said to them, I ask you, is it permitted on your Shabbat to do good or to do evil? To save or to destroy a life? He's like, healing a violation of the Shabbat? Healing is restoration. Healing is brokenness made new. If there's anything that inhibits rest, it's pain. I mean, when I hurt my back a couple weeks ago, I didn't sleep well. Even last week, I slept a lot on, my watch keeps track of like my sleep, and it tells me when I get deep sleep. I slept a lot, but I had zero deep sleep. The pain keeps you from rest. It's counter to rest. It's set up. In fact, when sin came, then we got pain. We were no longer in that rest, and there was pain. So for there to bring healing on Shabbat, to bring a cessation of pain and brokenness, was a beautiful picture of what Shabbat was actually all about. It was about the refreshing newness and healing of being in the presence of the Lord, of resting in Him. But somehow over time, religion had twisted God's gift of Shabbat into something that had lost the sight of its intent. So that these guys see Yeshua heal a man's paralyzed hand on Shabbat, and it says they were filled with fury and discussed among themselves what they might do to Yeshua. Yeshua had come to reclaim, to restore, to renew and rebuild. And he was reclaiming Shabbat, restoring it to what God intended it to be in the first place. In the similar episode where they're picking the heads of grain, the same episode, in Mark's gospel, he includes a detail of something Yeshua said that's not included in the others. Yeshua said this: Shabbat was made for man, not man for Shabbat. So the Son of Man is Lord even of Shabbat. God made humanity on the 6th day, and then he rested, and then he ceased. Shabbat was made after man was made. It was made as a gift, not a burden. Why? Why? Last week we talked about the why of Shabbat. Why did God give us Shabbat? Because God is good. Because God is kind. Because God loves. He gives good gifts. He gives good things for good reasons. When the gifts that he gives, whatever gifts, whether it be Shabbat, whether it be music, when the gifts that he gives become the thing that we are worshiping, rather than the giver being the focus of our worship, then the very gift that was meant to bring life and joy and goodness becomes an object of idolatry. So that even the Shabbat can become a twisted idolatry of what God intended it to be. Because they're not worshiping the Lord of Shabbat, they're worshiping some twisted version of it. And it becomes distorted, oppressive, and crushing. And so instead of functioning in its God-given purpose of drawing people to the Lord, it ends up sending people running from God. Last week, as we looked at the heart of Shabbat, the why of Shabbat, we noted that we don't come across the word Shabbat really until well into Exodus. In Genesis 2, we encountered the Lord's rest, his cessation from creation, Shabbat, which is close and obviously related. But then, even from there, then nothing about it. Nothing about Shabbat. Not Noah, no stories of Noah in Shabbat. No Abraham in Shabbat. Isaac, Jacob keeping Shabbat. No mention of it. Nothing about Joseph in Shabbat. Nothing. It's not until Exodus 16:23. In the context of God's miraculous provision of food in the wilderness. It's not introduced to us. We're not told about Shabbat initially on the top of Mount Sinai with thundering and earthquakes and fire. Shabbat, rest, cessation from striving, working, and anxiety. Ceasing from the anxiety of having to figure out how we're going to survive. See, even those religious people that were there that day looking to see if Yeshua was going to heal this man so that they might find a reason to accuse him. Their spirit was not at rest. Mental work is still work. It's actually exhausting. It's exhausting. It'll drain you. The heart of Shabbat is a cessation of anxiety because I trust in him. Shabbat is introduced to us in the context of receiving God's supernatural supply of manna in the wilderness. Manna, meaning, what is it? Every day, each day, there would be exactly enough. Right? We looked at this, but I'm going to reread it. And then Moses said to them, Exodus 16, verse 15. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that Adonai has given you to eat. This is the word that Adonai has commanded. Every man is to gather according to his needs, an omer per person, according to the number of people per household. Each man is to take it for those who are in his tent." Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, did so. Some gathered more, some less. And when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered more had nothing left over. And those that gathered less did not lack at all. Every man gathered according to his appetite. In the wilderness, how much food would it take to feed this multitude? Hey, Moses, what are you going to do when you get across that sea into that barren wilderness? How are you going to feed these people? You really should think about that before going through the waters. And that's what someone might say. The logistics of it all. I mean, this is a huge multitude. There's no gardens out here. They're not going on. How much hunting would you have to do to feed this multitude in the wilderness? God would provide just enough. Not too much, not too little, just right, like Goldilocks. There's a quiet rest in his provision. You know, I have this picture in my mind, one of my favorite movies. I love musicals. I always felt like long before people started doing these random things where they planned, what do they call that, where they start flash mob. flash mob where they start doing it in the middle of a public place. And I was like, man, people should go through life where all of a sudden we break into coordinated dancing down the street and singing and, Anyway, I love the musical Oliver. And I have this picture in my mind of Oliver Twist after he's finally gotten to London. And he meets the Artful Dodger. And Dodger has stolen a couple of pieces of bread and gives him some bread. And you see him just eating, this starving kid who's worn out, who's worked in workhouses and has not experienced love and has just sung, "Where is love?" Anyway, it's good. It's good. And he's just eating the food. And Dodger says, "Hey, I know a gentleman that'll give you lodgings for nothing." And he says, "Well, he must be a kind old gentleman." "Oh, yes, he's very kind." He's talking about Fagin, and usually what we're used to is when someone gives us bread for free. On the other side of it, there's a catch. What's the catch? And he takes his arm around him and goes through the streets, "Consider yourself at home," But I have the picture of the people of Israel eating this bread and going to this manna, this what is it, and eating it. But on the other side of that is not a Fagin who wants to oppress them. He's brought them out of oppression and into freedom. It's not a Fagin who wants to use them for his own evil intent, but a God who wants to give to them because he wants to give to them. They've been toiling. They've been toiling, and now he's giving them rest. So I have that picture of these slaves exhausted in every way. The Lord gives them bread, and they're devouring it. And he's giving us bread that leads us into the freedom of his provision. His first command to Adam and Eve was eat, eat, eat. And now, I added a third eat. It's only 2 eats. And now, he offers his always just enough supply. I'll give you just as much as you need to contentment. They've been toiling in pain 7 days a week to survive. Exhausting pain. And now the food is provided to refresh them. Go out and gather. How merciful, right? How gracious and tender of God. I mean, even if he said, you can 7 days a week go out and gather manna. Dayenu, that would have been enough. After being slaves, 7 days of just going and gathering the manna, that would have been enough. Great. But God, in his merciful, overflowing love and graciousness, his kindness, his tenderness, having already given you a layer of cake with frosting, puts another layer on top. It says, I'm not done blessing you. I'm not done blessing you. There's this sweet and beautiful and tender, merciful act of God where he says, hey kids, just step outside and gather what I have waiting for you. And then on the 6th day, there's going to be twice as much because the 7th day is the Shabbat. A what? It's a Shabbat. It's from the word yeshav, to sit. A whole day to rest, to sit. What? Don't gather. There'll be enough for you on the 6th day. They've never rested. There's been no Shabbat. 7 days a week for generation after generation after generation. Not only am I going to supply your needs, but I'm going to begin to do a reset in you. I'm going to reprogram you. I want you to cease from striving, to cease from your toil. Last week we looked at the curse from sin. In perfect fellowship we could eat, but now there would be atzav, pain, hurt, grief. Atzav in childbirth, atzav in working and surviving and working the soil. The consequence of sin was death, pain, atzav, and now you would eat, not by just gathering, eat from the fruit of the trees, but now you would eat by the sweat of your brow. The taskmaster of sin, the slave driver, the crushing Pharaoh. But here there's a physical representation of a spiritual reality. There's an invitation to restoration. There's an invitation to eat what he puts before you, but you have to step out and take what he has laid before you. There's an invitation to rest. It's a hint of the garden. 6 days you will toil, and on the seventh day, the wilderness will end, the toil will end, and there will be rest. And I want you to begin to get reprogrammed for what's coming, because there is a rest that's coming. There is work, but there is rest. There's going to be a restoration to relationship. Shabbat, cease from the pain of the curse. Rest physically, emotionally, spiritually. Trust me, be with your family. Eat. There's plenty. If you'll just walk with me, I have exactly what you need all the time, just enough. Enough to fill you, enough to let you rest and enjoy and live, because I've come to give you life, abundant life. Trust me wholly. Trust me completely. All you who are weary and heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. Wouldn't manna have been enough? Would have been more than enough. How sweet and kind and tender for the deliverer who washes our wounds and feeds us and says, hey, your slavery is over. Now learn to receive what I give you and rest. I've got you. The rest that the Lord offers these newly delivered sons and daughters in the midst of and on top of his already sufficient supply. Do you get it? His supply is already enough. And then he's like, and I got more free stuff. It stands in stark contrast to the restless anxiety that has been driving them and crushing them for the purpose of filling Pharaoh's insatiable lust for supply. With God's supply of manna, there is always exactly enough. With Pharaoh's demand for more supply, there is never enough. It's never enough. Look back at the opening chapter of Exodus, in Exodus 1. There arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, look, the people of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, are too numerous, too powerful for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or else they will grow even more numerous, so that if war breaks out, they may join our enemies, fight against us, and then escape from the land. So they set slave masters over them to afflict them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as storage cities for Pharaoh. So the text here speaks of storage cities, supply cities. At the center of their slavery, what was driving their slavery was a labor to accumulate supply. That they were afflicted to accumulate the supply for Pharaoh, which was never enough. Supply cities, it says they worked them harshly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor, with mortar, brick, doing all sorts of work in the fields. In all their labors, they worked them with cruelty. The Pharaoh has a bottomless pit of a stomach. An insatiable hunger for more commodities, more supply. Cities of supply, fill the granaries, make them work in the fields. He is driven by fear of being outnumbered. Paranoia and fear are feeding an anxiety that causes him to enslave the Hebrew people. It's the opposite of anything close to rest and trust in Shabbat. And there are supplies that are being built so that they will never fear. We have supply cities. We will always have enough, because what if bad things happen? We have enough. What if there's another famine as in the days of old? We have a plan. We just pile up resource. Insatiable desire for more, driven by a nagging fear of lack. An anxiety deep within, a restlessness, and a distrust of the unknown of tomorrow. I can't rest today because what if there's not enough tomorrow? The Pharaoh had an ancestor that was driven to anxiety. A Pharaoh from long ago had anxiety brought about by bad dreams, dreams he didn't understand. Genesis 41:8 says that he was disturbed, troubled in his spirit. And in Genesis 41, the son of Jacob and Rachel, Joseph, was in prison in Egypt. And the Lord made a way for Joseph to be brought before the Pharaoh to interpret these troubling dreams. Genesis 41:15, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there's no one to interpret it. I heard about you. It's said that you can listen to a dream to interpret it. Then Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it's not me, it's not within me. God will answer with shalom for Pharaoh. Hey, Pharaoh, the shalom, the peace for your anxiety is available. God will answer your anxiety with shalom. And he then interprets the dream. It says, what God is about to do, he has shown to Pharaoh. 7 years of abundance are about to come in the whole land of Egypt. The 7 years of famine will come up after them, and all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will consume the land. So the abundance in the land will be unknown because of the famine that follows, for it will be a very oppressive famine. He says, there will be abundance, and then there will be famine, but fear not. God has shown you how with him, through the ups and the downs, if you will listen to him, there will be just enough, exactly enough. So Joseph continues with the answer that the Lord had given him. He says, appoint wise administrators. And then verse 35, then let them gather all the food from these good years that are coming, and let them store up grain under Pharaoh's hand as food for the cities, so they may preserve it. Let the food be held in reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine that is coming upon the land of Egypt. Then the land will not be annihilated by the famine. So he did, and it happened. Verse 53, then the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine started to come, just as Joseph had said. So there was a famine in all the lands, but in the whole land of Egypt, there was bread. It was the ancient Great Depression following the Roaring '20s. A famine so severe that had God not intervened, no one would have remembered the good times and the land would have been swallowed up. But because of the word of the Lord, it did not touch Egypt. Because they listened to the word of the Lord, they listened to the instructions of the Lord, and the instructions of the Lord brought provision. The instructions of the Lord brought supply. The instructions of the Lord provided the supplies enough to sustain the people and even to be a blessing to those coming from the surrounding nations. God's instructive solution was store up supplies in the cities. This was where the whole idea of these supply cities originated. What was Egypt's solution? What's the solution? Store up supplies? No. Supplies are not the solution. The solution for Egypt is this: listen to and obey the word of Joseph's God. In obedience to the word of the Lord, the Pharaoh had shalom. It wasn't about the supply cities. It was about the supply cities because God said supply and store up. And this is very important. It's important to get that the solution is not the solution. The source of the solution is the solution. Supply cities won't always be the answer. If God says supply cities, you better listen. The solution is this. I think Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, said it best when she said in John 2:5, do whatever he tells you. That's the solution. Do whatever he tells you. Generations later in Exodus 1, the Pharaoh's focused on what he thinks is the answer. Well, we do supply cities. But he didn't know Joseph, which means he didn't know Joseph's God. He had forgotten the source of the solution. He didn't know where this grand idea had originated. And he thought he could take God's idea, use it as his own, become a God, be a God, and say, I don't need where that came from. I've got it from here. The source of the solution to yesterday's lack, to yesterday's brokenness, yesterday's crisis, the source, he is the solution to today's crisis. The God who gave you the instructions is the answer. We are often tempted to receive God's provision and then try to make what he told us yesterday the exact answer for today. We want to make it into a formula. I don't want to have to talk to you about it every day. I don't want to have to listen to you every day, so just tell me, can you give me the 5-year plan? Can you give me the 10-year plan so I can take it and run with it? I know what to do. Oh, is that all I got to do? Okay, I got it. He calls us into relationship, to listen to him, to trust in him, to depend upon him. The solution every day is to listen today to his voice, to remain attentive to his voice, to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and to lean not on your own understanding. Supply cities only work in the face of famine that God allows if God has told you to build supply cities. You have to listen to what he says today. Because when he leads you into a barren wilderness, when he leads us through a Red Sea, into what looks like a barren wilderness, that the only abundance in this wilderness is it's got a whole lot of nothing. It's overflowing with zilch. You and I may be tempted to copy the Pharaoh of Exodus, and from our own anxieties and our own troubled thoughts, try to co-opt the living word of God into something we can control for our own gain. That's what some of the Israelites did in the face of the barrenness of the wilderness. In stark contrast to Pharaoh's insatiable 24/7 drive to accumulate, gather, just in case. Just in case, you got to be afraid. You never know. Get gold. Fear. Freak out. God's going to drop you. What are you going to do? Oh my gosh. But what if? Does that sound? Surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. Is what he's saying true? But what if? Stop it. Stop. Be still and know that he is God. Exodus 16:19. Moses said to them, let no one save any of it until morning. Verse 20, however, they did not listen to Moses. Some of them preserved it until morning, but it bred worms and rotted. So Moses was angry with them. When you begin to twist God's solution and you don't do what he said to do with it, and you think you can co-opt it, what was meant to bring life turns into death. What was given to bring life becomes destructive. That which was going to satisfy and fulfill you is disgusting and gross. The very same thing, apart from his instructions. I know he said not to save any, but look, there's so much. What if there's none tomorrow? Then we will be the smart ones who stored it all up. And we'll be like, see, you should have listened to me, not to him. If God says build supply cities, do it. If God says don't save any, don't save any. Take just enough. I'll provide. Do it. And when God in his abounding love and kindness and his just beautiful tenderness is teaching us and reprogramming us to know that instead of living under the crushing anxiety of it's never enough and there'll never be enough and you need to be afraid of that Pharaoh, in contrast to that, we can now rest in your spirit, just to rest, to stop, though the mountains tumble into the sea. I will not fear. God is in her midst. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. I need not fear. Quiet. Be still, my soul. Be still. Shh. Peace. Shabbat. Rest. It's not just about some physical taking a day off. It is taking a day off. But it's more than taking a day off. It's trust. Rest in him. But what if he lets me down? Trust. Rest in him. 6 days you shall work. On the seventh, rest. The only day you store up, he says, is on the sixth day. Because on the seventh day, you're going to sit. You're going to Shabbat. You're going to rest. Do it. If you go out to gather on the seventh day, you're going to find out God's word is always true, which is what some folks found out. In Exodus 16, some of them followed their instincts, their old programming, instead of following his instructions. Verse 27, yet on the seventh day, some of them went out to gather, and they found none. The Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my mitzvot and my Torah? How long will you disregard my commandments and my instructions? See, Adonai has given you the Shabbat. So on the sixth day, he gives you the bread of 2 days. I know what I'm doing. Let every man stay in his place. Let no man go out on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. It was a gift, reprogramming, resetting. He calls us to rest in him, to trust him. Total rest, total trust. Six days you will work, and on the seventh, rest. And again, I'm not going to debate with people about, well, is it Saturday and Sunday, whatever. The command is rest. Rest in him. I'm glad we gather together on Shabbat to Shabbat. But I'm also glad that people gather together whenever they gather together to exalt his name and to rest in him and to enjoy the rest that he has for us. He gives it not as a burden, but as a gift. And when we think, well, look, these bills aren't going to pay themselves, what do you want me to do? When we do that, we are allowing the anxieties of the enemy, the restlessness driven by the insatiable need for more, a voice saying it's never enough, to overrule the voice of God that says, I will always have enough. My God will supply all your needs according to his riches in Messiah Yeshua. There is a liar, there is a deceiver that seeks to twist you up in knots, in fear, to dominate you, to whisper in your ear as you devote a day of rest and trust to the Lord and say, you are unproductive, you are lazy, you lazy slug. That's what Pharaoh said. Exodus 5, he says, for they are lazy when they cry out saying, let's go and sacrifice to our God. Let even heavier work be laid upon the men. So they must labor, paying no attention to deceptive words. The liar calls God's word a lie. He wants to crush you with anxiety so that you will pay no attention to God's call for you to rest and trust in him. Pharaoh's voice whispering in guilt in your ear saying, you're just lazy. You'll never have enough because you're lazy. What if there's a famine? Supply cities. Just keep building supply cities. That's the answer. What's the answer? Just do whatever he says. Rooted in the fear of another famine. The world system took the God-ordained solution of supply cities and tried to control it and improve upon it. To create storage cities so we don't need to find ourselves in the place where we need Joseph's God again. And whether they realized it or not, the gods of Egypt, whether the people realized it or not, these gods of Egypt sought to create a dependency upon self, sought to bring about an independence from God. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But independence from God, the source of life, brings death. When the Red Sea closed over the Egyptian troops, the supply cities had not produced life for the Egyptians. No, in fact, These supply cities, the idea of a supply city that started as a gift from God, when that became the focus of the hope of the Egyptians, as they exchanged the instruction of the living God for their own wisdom, and they rebelled against him and they defied his voice, those supply cities that they built on the backs of enslaving God's people became the catalyst toward their downfall, toward their death. Because the supply cities, if they did it when God said it, it's life. When you do it in a way God says not to do it, the very same thing is death. Same thing with our words, right? Blessing and cursing. Our words can bring life, can bring death. Nuclear power can bring great power and energy and life, and it can bring the most destructive death. You do what God says. You stay focused on the giver, not on the gift. Worship the giver, not the gift. When we worship, we see this, when we worship our gift, we get our eyes off the giver. When it becomes about when the music, the beauty of music that he's given us becomes not about him, but it becomes about the music, be careful. When preaching, when the gift that he's given me becomes about something other, about saying what I want to say other than what he's telling me to say. If I begin to walk in disobedience because I want to puff myself up or anything, that what he intends to bring life can bring destruction. If I take my eyes off the giver and I begin to worship the gift, what he's given you is for you to enjoy, but keep listening to him. And don't hold on to anything too tightly. Cling to him, is what Deuteronomy says. Cling to your God. Cling to him. He'll always give you exactly what you need and more. When he says store up, store up. When he says gather manna, gather manna. And when he says it's Shabbat, rest. Even if you go hunting for extra manna, won't be anything there. Trust what he says. It'll go through your fingers like sand. Don't we get it? Don't we see that he is good? He invites us into his rest. He has come not to enslave us, not to drive us and crush us, but to free us, to feed us, to give us rest, to call us into his rest, that we might have life and life more abundantly. Amen? I want to close with this from Isaiah 55. Everyone who thirsts, come to the water. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourself in abundance. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that your soul may live. Listen to him. He is all we need. Don't let fear, don't let anxiety, the whispers of the enemy telling you you're never enough, you'll never be good enough. Strive, strive, strive. And he says, trust in me. I will work in you. I am forming you. Submit your will to me. I've put it before you. He just says, come out and receive what I've given you. This morning, if you've not surrendered your life to Yeshua, if you think that by going through certain motions, checking off certain boxes, that's what's going to make us right with God, you're mistaken. You can't do enough. But in his own love and his own tenderness and his own compassion and kindness, he has provided us with everything we need. Lord, we pray that you'll continue to teach us to rest, to trust, to listen for your voice, to walk with you, to depend on you, to look to you. Help us, Lord, not to live off of yesterday's relationship with you. Help us not to stay where we were, but to continue listening day by day for your voice, to grow in you, to walk with you. Give us ears to hear your voice and a heart to do your will. In Yeshua's name.